I don't care about persistent battle damage. I want Ikakumon's braid to stay on him for the rest of the show. Like, that's the most important thing.
Oh yeah, 強がって飛び乗って風に流って青空昨日を越えろ
Welcome to Padages, your critically nostalgic analytical tour of the Digimon anime. I'm your host, Jeff Ruberg. This week we're discussing Digimon Adventure 2020, Episode 8, The Children's Attack on the Fortress, and my guest this week is one of the managing editors of Anime Feminist and a co-host of the Trash and Treasures podcast. Thanks for coming on the show, Vrai.
Hi, thanks for having me. It is, apparently 2020 is the year of nostalgia bombs, because I got reeled back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Real hard, and now I'm in the Digimon feels. You know what, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's just, Digimon, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it never ends. It'll just, 20 years from now, we'll be at the Digimon 2020 reboot, 20 years out. Oh, God.
Apparently, because they don't make new Digimon anymore, they're scared. They just keep trotting out Adventure again. So, see you at the next reboot.
Yep. Before we get into Vry's Digimon backstory, I just wanted to mention that the survey that I talked about last week is still running, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. I just really appreciate it if you take a couple minutes to fill it out so I know what kind of things to focus on for these weekly episodes. So, let's get back to Vry. So, okay, what's your Digimon backstory? How did you get into Digimon? What parts of the franchise, like V-Pets, toys, etc., were you into, and which seasons have you seen?
Okay, so I was basically the target audience when the first Digimon dub aired in the United States. It came out when I was 9 years old. And I watched it on Saturdays on Fox, and I saw both seasons of Adventure. I kind of dropped off halfway through Tamers, not because I didn't like it, but because I just couldn't figure out when they were airing new episodes. And so I kind of lost the plot of what they were doing and got into other stuff instead, which is when Yu-Gi-Oh! Got me. But I was deep in it. I watched the show absolutely religiously. I had those little, I think they were Burger King toys, where it was this plastic Digivice, and inside there were like these, you would pop it open and there would be these 3 little metallic cards inside. I had the little plush dolls that they sold at Kmart for a hot minute. I could never get one of Gabumon, which made me really sad. But I was so visibly into it that my 5th grade teacher, our classroom had this thing where you accrued a certain amount of good noodle points, and you could pick out something special from the nice box at the end of semester. And when my turn came around, my teacher presented me with this Biomon clock that she had gotten like at Target on sale. And it was very good and dear to me. I also, to date myself even more, used to check out one of the PS1 games from Blockbuster for their $1 rental, but I never got very far in it because, you come back and you get it again and your save file is gone. So it's kind of how that goes. And then after I fell out of Tamers, I just never really went back to it because there was that gap where I wasn't really sure where to find fan subs, and then it was like an anime I always thought of as a kid's anime. That was very much a childhood thing for me. And then when Tri came around, I just wasn't into it. So this is kind of the first time I've really gotten back into the franchise since I was a kid, despite every so often I'd look over there, over and be like, is Digimon still going? Good for them.
How far did you get in Try before deciding that it wasn't really your thing?
Essentially, it started airing, and I was like, maybe I should watch Try. I used to like Digimon. And then I heard all the fandom talking about was them being really salty about love triangle stuff, and I was like, maybe I don't want to watch Try. All right, I'm good. And also kind of hearing that the O2 kids, who sort of have a special place in my heart, are very much not the focus of it, sort of bummed me out. So I had planned to go see Kazuna even, and then, the plague happened.
Yeah. That was really exciting when it seemed like, I remember even like a week or two before it happened, it was like, oh, I guess, at least in my city, movie theaters are still running. So like, it might be irresponsible to go out, but maybe I'll do it. And then within a week, it was like, no one is allowed to leave their apartment. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
Well, this will not be happening then. I guess that goes into, we banish that to the abyss. Eventually it'll happen.
I can't even, there's some release schedule. I forget the date now. In a couple months, it's going to be on digital services. So
that's good. Yeah, I'll give it a try. Honestly, and this is no, this is no knock on anybody else who's having a good time with some of those continuations. For me, I categorize Try and the other continuations in the same zone of stuff I'm not interested in as the terrible, terrible flash forward finale of O2. Like, that's the realm of fanfic to me. I don't want to see official continuations of what they did when they're no longer having their kid adventure.
Yeah, I think I think especially like one thing that really it kind of like upsets me on a philosophical level about what Try did. And you
Mhm.
mentioned like people were being salty about the ships and stuff, and it's like I think I actually tried as hard as possible to avoid upsetting anyone's ships.
Mm.
Like they didn't like canonically confirm any relationships. They kept things as ambiguous as possible, and like the only thing people were salty about was like if two characters got to talk to each other or not.
Gotcha.
They didn't have like the audacity to even like change up like shake up the status quo at all. It's like okay, we did leave everything as is and like not change anything. It's like at least fanfic is like takes it in a fun and interesting direction.
Yeah, and like if you're gonna do the continuation, do something meaningful with it. Like to me, Digimon is a series that I just don't look to for romance in the official source material. Like I had ships back in the day. Like Baby Vrai did definitely ship Daisuke and Ken and also Miyako and Hikari, but
Oh yeah.
I feel like Digimon's strongest moments are as a friendship story. So maybe I didn't want to see all of that adolescent hormone stuff and the ways that the show would get it wrong from how it was in all of our headcanons.
Right, right. Yeah, like even thinking about like Davis and Ken or Daisuke and Ken, like it's like wow, they're so gay for each other, but also like they're like childhood best friends too. Like it's not like oh man, I want to see them like making out.
Right. It's like DNA Digivolution is very gay in concept, but also they're nice friends and maybe they'll hold hands and hang out at each other's houses and have like a nice platonic sleepover.
Yeah.
Like that's the Digimon zone.
So quick lightning round. What's your favorite season?
Adventure 02?
I could have guessed that.
I may have subtly indicated it.
Favorite Digimon?
Wizardmon.
Favorite villain?
Does he also count as favorite villain? If not, probably Arukenimon. I loved that
Ooh.
whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I loved that arc.
Favorite? Oh, okay. So, of the Adventure Kids, favorite character?
Of the Adventure Kid. When I was a kid, I probably would have said Matt, but growing up, I feel like I've gained a lot of appreciation for Joe and Mimi, especially Joe as like that sort of very anxious kid with a lot of self-doubt. He's a good boy.
Yeah, yeah. Those characters were like the least. I felt like the least relatable as a kid, and then the more I've aged, the more I'm like, they're so relatable. Like what? They're like.
I feel like the dub definitely did Mimi a disservice too back in the day, and I don't know how much of it was baby misogyny at the time. She was girly, and I didn't want to like the girly character. But yeah, I don't know. I've just been enjoying the heck out of her with the reboot.
Yeah. What's your hottest Digimon take?
I think I just expounded on it for the last 2 minutes. Try doesn't need to exist. It is a shameless cash grab, and it should not be.
Maybe people will be mad at me for agreeing with you too much, but I don't think that would be that controversial. I think a lot of people agree. Well, okay, yeah, I guess I don't quite. I guess I think that I'm disappointed in Try, but I think it could have been done better. So I guess a little bit different.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I just think of it as the Star Trek problem, where once you stop trying to do new and interesting things with this extremely versatile world and box yourself into only revisiting these old characters, the creative well starts to run dry pretty quick, which is honestly what surprised me so much about Adventure Colon, as I like to call it, is how vibrant it feels.
Yeah, do you feel like it's so like moving on to your thoughts about this reboot in general, like do you think that it is a good balance of both returning to the old well over and over again for the 50th time, but doing things in a new and interesting way?
I mean, I think it benefits of the fact that I haven't really watched the original Digimon in a long time, because every so often I will think, I'd like to watch some Digimon again, and then the sub will be back in the state of limbo from the last time I checked. But with my foggy 10-year-old memories, I think, yeah, it really captures sort of what I remember about the series while also looking very pretty and doing a few new interesting things. I feel like it's hard to say too much definitively, because other than sort of the movie homage that was the first 3 episodes, all of the character intro ones have all been more or less familiar. My biggest curiosity right now is, are they gonna do the Skull Greymon episode? Because that one's burned into my memory forever. It was very traumatic for child me.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the vibe that this Taichi is like doesn't seem to have those flaws.
Yeah, me either. He doesn't seem to be as that recklessly pushy that would end up in that situation, which is interesting because Taichi's fine. He's never been a character I've been super interested in, so that's always my low-key worry about this one is how forefronted he is, and I'll be interested to see if that
Yeah.
becomes a problem once they finish kind of rotating through all of these intro champion episodes.
Yeah, like it could get, especially with like rounding off the edges of his character, like it could get really dull if he spends so much screen time being prominent. It's like, okay, we've already kind of gotten this. This is kind of dull now. There's so many more interesting characters in the background that you
Hmm.
could be focusing on.
Yeah, he's a good kid, but he doesn't seem to really have a lot of notable flaws where I could think, and here's what a character episode about him would look like.
Yeah, but I mean, it's too. I guess it's too early to tell because
Yeah.
like in what like episode what are we on episode 8 episode 8 of the original show was when I think Devmon first appeared. I couldn't have predicted the whole like his whole arc after Skullgreymon and like doubting himself and like I don't know what he like talked to his baby self and like learned to ride a bicycle. I don't know, something happened.
Yeah, that sounds like Digimon.
um before we jump into talking about this episode, I wanted to do a quick bit of follow up to something I mentioned in the last episode. Basically, a heavy topic that I made light of and did not explain very well. Nick and I last episode were joking about the concept of slavery isekai, and I joked that Palmon acting as a butler was like, "Oh no, what if Digimon has become a slavery isekai?" And I realized, so with a lot of these, with getting in different guests, each of us has like a different shared lingo, and one of the consequences of that is that I didn't even think about how that sounds to people who don't know what the concept I'm talking about is. So first of all, an isekai. Isekai is just a name for the somewhat recent trend in anime of transported to another world, transported to fantasy world kind of stories. Obviously, it's not that new of a trend because Digimon has always been one of those, but it's had an uptick recently.
It definitely had a revival after Sword Art Online and shifted
Oh
from
yeah,
a more stories that were mostly about adolescent girls coming of age in the 90s to male wish fulfillment fantasies in the late 2000s and 2010s, which has sort of reached its nadir with the slavery isekai.
yeah. Like it's an easy shorthand for especially light novels, which is where a lot of these stories originate from. To have a new world and have an entry point for the character who doesn't know anything about it, and then you can explain it to the audience too. But anyway, so an even more recent trend among these isekai stories is having slavery be a prominent element of the world that they're transported into, and they maybe the main character initially is like, oh no, this seems bad, but over the course of the story, often by becoming a slave owner themselves, then comes to learn that slavery is not that bad, and it's like it's really gross and disgusting, and it's a trend that basically everyone that I know and talk to in my anime circle finds repugnant and very exhausting. And so when Nick and I were joking about it, it was kind of like, oh, it was like, oh no, what if Digimon became this too? Like, because we thought like, well, clearly Digimon's not that. But yeah, I didn't mean to be making light of slavery, and it's kind of like an unfortunate reality that we've come to accept about the anime and otaku media space recently. So
You know, the upshot of this is it makes me very happy that a lot of fans who are listening to your podcast don't know what slavery isekai is. Because as somebody who has to review seasonal shows, I thought that this was an inescapable, soul crushing trend. So this is good.
that's a good point. Like they haven't become so common that like the everyone watching anime knows it.
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
just the worst. It's also the worst outcome of the harem genre, where essentially you have these sort of on a spectrum of insuliness. The author can't think of any other way that the female love interest would actually want to stick around them, so they make up a plot contrivance for them to be literally bound to the protagonist. I guess it's also a little bit like the maid fetish anime in that sense,
Yeah.
where you're bound to serve them, and actually it turns out that you like being devoted to this jackass who turns out to be slightly less terrible than it first appeared. Maybe they're bad.
Yeah, like the angle that makes me the most frustrated about it is that like people that defend them because they're like, oh no, well this character chose to be this person's slave, and it's like, oh no,
No.
that doesn't negate the whole context of. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Palmon is not that.
No, it's not that. It's okay, children.
All right, so on that sour note, let's dive into the fun stuff. We're going to talk about Digimon Adventure 2020, Episode 8, The Children's Attack on the Fortress, aka Garurumon Gets Bluer, aka Did You See, Did You Hear, Did You Siege, aka Listen to Me Struggle to Think of a Pun because nothing rhymes with Fortress. we're going to be talking about spoilers for everything that was in this episode, including everything that was in the Crunchyroll episode, including the next episode title and preview, but not anything past in episode 9 or the titles of anything beyond that. Yeah, so Fry, what did you think about this episode overall?
Was a good time. It was certainly interesting to see them do kind of the stealth intro character intro episode for Yamato when they, oh snap, we already did that in the opening of the series, so he didn't quite get the same deep character focus as everybody else. I think they have done some small interesting new things with his character compared to the old show, or my memories of the dub of the old show. um
Well, I think his early characterization in the original show was so tied into his protecting of TK or Takaru. So it was
mhm.
like, this is a completely different context for him, I guess, to see him without defending him all the time.
Yeah, it is really interesting that they've kept both Takaru and Hikari at home for this run.
Yeah, it's they're basically the big lingering question. Like, I feel like with each episode of the reboot, there's like one more question on my list of like, how are they going to handle this? And it's like those are this huge questions that are still up in the air.
If I had to guess, I would say that the Holy Digimon is Angemon in
Mhm.
some capacity, and that will coincide with our ticking clock about the 3 days left in Tokyo, and somehow we will get the small child over to the digital world that way. But I don't know. Honestly, this it's interesting. The zone the writing of this show is just close enough to how the original played out that it'll surprise me sometimes by going off in weird directions at unexpected moments. I'm still waiting for Devimon to show up, frankly, because I miss that Gilbert Gottfried little jerk. It's not really fitting with the tone of where we are now, but my nostalgia.
Yeah, so let's dive into this episode. So the episode starts off with the kid riding on Ikakumon. We get a shot of Mimi braiding Ikakumon's hair, which is amazing.
It's so cute. She's so good.
And Palmon's also. So I remember at the end of last episode, people were praising, like, oh, at least Joe doesn't have seasickness this time. Nope, he does. He's hanging off of Ikakumon upside down, only being held onto Ikakumon by Palmon. So they're both great.
He's a good boy.
The Kakumon's fur is not long enough to braid, but like I'll suspend all my disbelief for that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about how they've drawn him this time around, but he looks so much fluffier. Like the appa is strong with this version of Ikakumon.
I've heard some people talk about. I guess we're gonna get Ogremon soon, next episode. But I guess because of Ogremon losing his horn in an earlier episode, people in the fandom have been talking about persistent battle damage on Digimon. That's a thing that would be cool to represent in the series. I
Mm.
don't care about persistent battle damage. I want Ikakumon's braid to stay on him for the rest of the show. Like that's the most important thing.
It's horrible. Why would you do that to some animator?
Yeah, you're right. They barely want to animate Kakumon and Birdramon anyway, so
It's because they're very tired.
yeah. So while they're on Kakumon, they're following a lighthouse light. And at about the same point that me and my boyfriend watching it, he was like, why is there a lighthouse if there are no boats in this world? And I think Sora also voices a concern of like, why is there a lighthouse? They'll eventually find that it's not a lighthouse. But Koshiro calls in with an update on Tokyo and that they're, you know, supermarkets, convenience are empty. Joe is upset that Koshiro is so smart for a fourth grader. This is a side of Joe I do not remember from the original show. Like him being jealous of Koshiro and jealousy is not the leader. Not a good look.
I mean, it's certainly petty, but also I am kind of interested in it because I remember Joe's entire character trait being nervous and does not want to do the things and is the stick in the mud. So, like, I hope it doesn't get dragged out over the entire show, but
Mhm.
it's kind of the opposite of what they did with Taichi, where, all right, I want to see this interaction between these two characters where they kind of have to talk it out, and Joe has to sort of get over this insecurity that he has, and Koshiro has to accept that he is valuable, because I feel like that kid really chronically undervalues himself.
Yeah, and I think it's totally understandable for Joe to have this reaction if he goes in assuming that he's going to be the oldest and he's going to be the one in charge.
And also just the soul crushing pressure you can already see on him to succeed. Like, I feel for him.
Right. What I find so fascinating about Joe is that as a kid, I just was like, oh, he's a nerd. But it's like, no, he's not even that smart. Like, he just works really hard and like has ambition in life. And
Mm-hmm.
Koshiro is the one who's actually like talented and gifted.
Yeah, that's a really interesting dichotomy, honestly.
Yeah. So Koshiro, when he starts to get cut off, says, "Everyone, please focus." Dot dot dot. Holy Digimon. Dot dot dot. I I don't know if this line was supposed to be implying that he actually has new information about the Holy Digimon, or if he just was going to repeat the same message that they'd already known about.
I don't know, but it sounds cryptic.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
So once the fog clears, lighthouse is not a lighthouse, and they get shot at by the quote unquote lighthouse. Everyone falls to the water. Bros over hose. Ikakumon saves the guys, and Birdramon saves the girls. And of course, Birdramon again has no evolution sequence, just jumps out of the water as is. Actually, how have you thought about that? About Birdramon not getting any evolution sequence in the previous episodes as well?
Honestly, I didn't think about it too. Didn't she get one during the introduction episode where they have to jump off the cliff? I
Uh,
thought she had.
she got basically, and like I think technically the answer is yes, but it was basically just there was a wall of flame and like the leg stuck out of the wall of flame, and that was it. And then it was like, oh, and now she's there. But that's really interesting to hear because from the perspective of like hyper analyzing every episode of the podcast, it's like every episode for the podcast, I'm just like, oh my god, this mantra of like, where's evolution sequence, revolution sequence? But it's interesting to hear that like without that, hyper focused lens, that it didn't even stand out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're just like, oh, that's neat, and I respect that the animators need, this stock footage will help ease things up for them because the combat sequences often look quite smooth and pretty. But I don't know, they're not. To me, I'm almost relieved when a character gets one, and then we sort of shorthand it for the
Oh
rest
yeah.
of the series because a little stock footage goes a long way.
So you'd rather they like skip past it and just
Yeah, like I would rather just see the evolution sequence for the big emotional moment when a character has a new evolution for the first time, and then, we're done, we're moving on. All right, this is where they need to be for the plot. Cool, let's move on.
yeah.
But like, I see what you mean. Like, if Birdramon is their favorite and they didn't get like a fully detailed one, and everybody else has, especially given the gender imbalance of the show, then that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's mainly the gender imbalance that's like, ugh. Especially, is it better that we got in the full cast now? I don't know, because at least now, like, Palmon got a more elaborate sequence. But
Was the Garurumon one about as detailed as the Birdramon one was before? I felt like it was also shortened.
oh no, the Gabumon one.
Mm-hmm.
The Gabumon was much more. The Gabumon one was like the full on. It was like as elaborate as the Agumon to Greymon one.
Look at me talking like I know anything when I don't.
No, no. And I don't think it was as good as the Greymon one. Like, I think it like flashed by a little bit faster, and there was like, I think it was doing a little bit more motion to cover up that not as much was animated, but it was still like in terms of time, it like lasted 40 seconds.
Fair enough.
Now I feel silly for knowing this stupid trivia.
No, it's cool. Thank you for telling me this. Like, just because it's not something that I hone in on when I'm watching the show doesn't mean it's not cool to know about. And I think it is valid to keep an eye on those things because as much as I really like the female characters in Digimon, I feel like they tend to sort of get short shrift in these smaller ways that aren't immediately easy to point to and go, isn't that kind of sexist?
Yeah, exactly. And I hope, my very optimistic hope is that it's just about the specifics of how Birdramon and a little bit of Kakumon too, maybe like those two models specifically are harder to animate or like are just much more like, I don't know, weird shapes to animate compared to Greymon or Togemon. Togemon's basically a cartoon, like already. It's just like a cartoon face. Like that's fun to animate. So my hope is that maybe once they get to the other stages, that it isn't as that same disparity. It maybe rebalance in some way. Like maybe Garudamon is more interesting to animate, but we'll see whenever we get there.
Yeah, I feel like if Garudamon still has a very shortened sequence, especially when they're already sort of similar size and there's some interesting things you could do with the morphage there, then you have a concerning pattern.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I don't want to hone in too much on the evolution sequence because, like, if we're just evolution sequence and Birdramon was lavishly animated outside of that, it'd be like, okay, who cares? But it's that, like, there's always no sequence. And then also Birdramon, like, barely moves, like, just slides across the screen or, like, has, like, one stock attack animation. It's just, like, flapping her wings and some things shoot out of her. Like, so it's like you're saying, it's a bunch of little things little minor cuts that add over time to the general sexist imbalance in Digimon. So they all fall in the water, and then they get to shore. They get attacked by a swarm of Tankmon. We see that the lighthouse is actually two rotating Solarmon. When Birdramon shot down by Birdmon's spotted by the Solarmon and then shot down. That was a cute way to have a lighthouse in Digimon.
Yeah.
It's a cute concept. Like if you were to brainstorm like how can we have a lighthouse in this series? Okay, two Digimon that rotate and spit out a light. Like
Yeah, I feel like that kind of thing makes me really happy because there's, so much of the stuff in the episodes before this are just here's some generically old technology. It's there, but having this sort of living active stuff with Digimon is very cool.
Gabumon comes in and saves everyone, and then Yamato leads them to a cave. Taichi and Yamato reunite. This is you mentioned before that there are some like subtle differences to Yamato's character, and this is what I thought of when you mentioned that as soon as Taichi mentions that he's Yamato's friend, Yamato's eyes like perk up, and he's like, "What? Friend?" He doesn't say that, but of course that's a
Friends.
subtext. He has friends. Oh my god. Agumon and Gabumon are cute. Once we meet Gabumon officially for the first time.
Gabumon's so cute. Gabumon was always one of my favorites as a kid, so that was just kind of warm fuzzy to see him back. Because obviously,
Yeah.
I was one of those wolf kids as a child, so obviously the big dog Digimon is the best one.
Yeah, I have to wait until Wergurumon for my personal interest to awaken, but
I have heard that there is a particular interest.
well, furry anime is making a resurgence, so not a resurgence.
Listen, if it makes the furry fans happy, then Godspeed. Y'all have a good time.
So yeah, Yamato asks him about Tokyo, and in exchange, he tells him about the fortress, and basically mentions that he wants to sneak in to get intel about their enemies. And I thought this it was hard to suspend my disbelief that they like need to sneak into this fortress to get information when like okay that's fair if it's like a slightly hard task and they like struggle a little bit but they're like later on putting their lives on the line. So I was like, do you need to risk sacrificing your life to maybe get information? I don't know.
Yeah, I buy it as part of Yamato's character where he's very much setting himself up as this childish action hero almost who's going to do the thing and get the information because that's what like cool spy heroes do to save the day. But I think that could have been better established in canon because yeah, they immediately go all in on this very high stakes event, but I guess I also just sort of implicitly bought that they got to go through the fortress because otherwise they will die trying to go around it.
Yeah, they say that. Like Taichi says, we can't go anywhere if we can't get to the fortress. And I'm like, did you look to the sides? Like, I don't think you even looked. So,
No, there are invisible walls to either side.
oh, you're right. You're right. I forgot it's a video game. Yeah, I think you're right that like Yamato, it makes sense for his character to be like basically like this is where he realizes the limitation of doing things on his own is like he thought he could do it on his own without really getting into danger, and then he realized that, like he wasn't capable of doing that without help. So yeah, so basically Yamato says he doesn't need dead weight and tells Taichi and everyone to stay behind, and Gabumon calls him out on his tsundere bluff a little bit and is like basically implying he just wanted everyone to be safe. Oh, yeah, and like we were talking before, this is when the Gabumon evolution sequence happens, and it's pretty elaborate. Yeah, I don't have anything much more to say about that. It's long, it's fancy, it looks very nice.
Maybe the reason it didn't stick for me is that, like, to me, the elaborate evolution sequence is the cool moment when you get to see the champion form for the first time, and we've already seen Garurumon because of the 3-episode arc at the beginning. So it's just like that.
Right, it's
All
just kind
right,
of
we
like,
haven't
oh,
seen it yet, so now we're seeing it.
right. It was more of a like debut of the sequence than of the Digimon, which is weird. Yeah, so once we get back from the act break, Yamato and Gurumon dodge some Tankmon. This is a great moment. Joe takes Mimi's towel and runs out to declare they're surrendering with a white flag.
Oh, Joe.
And he almost dies until Palmon pulls him back. And then the towel gets burned up, and Mimi mourns her towel until Palmon's like, that towel wasn't even yours, it was Sora's. They're all great.
One thing I do find like interesting about Joe compared to Yamato is that Yamato wants to be an adult in like the cool film kind of way, and also he has kind of had to grow up because at least in the other versions he is more or less parenting Takeru. But Joe wants to also be an adult in this flawed way where he thinks of it as all adulting is all of the boring and parts that kids don't want to do. So he's going to be the one who faces up to do them because he's the responsible kid. So he's going to be the one who surrenders and talks this out. And like I just think that that's a really neat, interesting character trait for him.
Yeah, like you were saying, like Yamato is acting out what an adult is in an action movie, and Joe is acting out what an adult would be in real life, but doesn't realize that they are in an action movie, so he's wrong, and Yamato ends up being more right.
Well, and like also Joe's going through the motions while still having a kid's, processing power. He's a smart kid, but
Yeah.
also he doesn't have the ability to sort through this is the best action for this case of when he's just thought, well, what's the most boring, realistic, responsible thing I could do? I'm gonna do that, and the world will conform to it because the world is orderly. And probably somebody could make a really good essay about Joe as a character, as sort of a parody of expectations for very studious Japanese college-bound students.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. So after that whole Tao scenario, Taichi gets the idea that they can be a decoy for Yamato, and he runs away. And Sora also runs along willingly, which leaves Joe and Mimi, who become unwilling decoys because their rock gets blown up, and then
Oh,
like if they really wanted to, they could run back to the cave, but instead they run along with them. So like they're basically agreeing to do it with them.
I love the little slow-mo sequence where Yamato looks down and sees them not having
Oh,
a good time, but like doing their best to be supportive. That was my favorite part of this episode.
oh yeah, when they smile to him, and it's like, okay, I'm like, okay, I don't think you could see the smiles from that far away, but like it doesn't matter because this moment's so sweet.
Doesn't matter. No logic, only feelings.
That's like Digimon doesn't do logic well. It does the feelings pretty good
Mm,
sometimes. So
heck yeah.
yeah, so Yamato runs ahead, reaches a gate, and gets blocked by Dr. Ranamon. And then this is something that really frustrated me. So he gets to the gate, gets blocked by Dr. Ranamon. Sora and Taichi catch up, and Sora's like, I'm gonna take Dr. Ranamon. So she goes off and like deals with Dr. Ranamon. So then Yamato and Taichi run ahead. And then, like, we're gonna get to what happens with Yamato later on. Like, a bunch of stuff happens with Yamato, and like 10 minutes late, not 10, 5 minutes later, and runtime later, Sora's still fighting Dark Tyrannomon, does like one attack, and then Taichi comes back and saves her, and it's like, what? you, she went off and took care of Dr. Tyrannomon by like not even getting to do anything. But
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like they're afraid to use Bergermon as anything but like an escape vehicle, and that sort of sucks.
yeah, I guess one thing that premiered this episode that because we're talking about like it's nice when there's a quick evolution sequence when it's not in the middle of the action. When I guess it's Palmon, Gomamon, and Piomon when they digivolve in the middle of the battle, it's like this quick little sequence where like just a light flashes and they digivolve. And I thought that was pretty good
Mm.
for not distracting from what's going on. Although once Greymon digivolves in the middle of the battle, it's not even his scene. Like it's not even about Taichi. They still give
They
him
still got to do the full sequence, and why?
yeah. And I'm like, this is about Yamato. What are we doing? Why are you even showing this? Like, it looks cool, but
Because kids like dinosaurs.
yeah. So Agumon shoots down Solarmon and then allows Yamato to jump up the tower to Goemon. That's when the mid jumps, he sees everyone smiling at him, and he stares so deeply into Taichi's eyes that his crest starts to activate. And I mean, did you think when this was happening that like his crest starts to activate, he like starts. I think Garurumon starts to glow. Did you think a Digivolution sequence is going to happen again?
I really didn't, because if that would be too much, if
Hmm.
they can just access that in not the weird moon logic that is the first little mini arc, then this show is completely broken.
Well, I don't think. I mean, it seems like from the next episode teaser that we might be getting them getting Greymon evolving next episode.
Mm. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess to me the Digimon plot progression system is so firmly set in stone that I just never had for a moment the thought, "Oh, maybe we will jump a step."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the thing. Like I was like, oh my god, they're totally setting this up. And my boyfriend, when we were watching, he was like, they can't have Yamato go first. Like we haven't gotten Metal Greymon yet, so they can't do it. And I was like, okay, what if they could?
But what if they did, though?
Yeah, it's like, what if they did? He's like, no, they can't. They're not allowed to.
Yeah. No, there is an order to this, and they will go in order. 'Cause Taichi's the leader one. He is the Red Ranger.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about order though, like if we get Metal Greymon before we get Skull Greymon though, I'm gonna be sad.
I will also be sad, because then that will be just like the ultimate. What is Taichi doing here then, besides being the mascot?
I mean, there would still be time, like especially if Metal Greymon premieres, it debuts so early, like there would still be time in the season to. And by the way, there has been rough confirmation that the season is going to quote unquote air for about a year, so probably about 50 episodes.
I had wondered, because I don't watch a lot of kids anime,
Oh yeah,
so
same. Yeah.
I had just sort of assumed out the gate that this would be on the core system, but I guess not.
It still might not be a core. It might not be a single chunk. It might be like 26 split 26 or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is basically just from like an interview with the manga artist who did a recent tie-in with it. So it's like not like official confirmation or anything, but
Right.
that's the strongest rumor so far.
Because like I feel like if they just did 13 and then had a long break with this, that would not be good for the pace of the story as it's being told.
Yeah, yeah. So Yamato's crest activates, Garurumon glows, and it's not a digivolution sequence. He just seems to get some kind of power up. I think it's weird because I think this is the kind of thing that works narratively on its own, but like in the context of Digimon, where we kind of have like a cinematic language built up over the entire show of like, oh, once a thing starts glowing, then they're going to digivolve. It was kind of a little confusing.
Yeah, we need the episode needs him to have a power up at the end of it because this is Yamato's character episode in the proper sequence. But he's already in champion form, so
Yeah.
what do? He is champion form +1.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's kind of like Digimon has always been so simple with that kind of stuff. It's like they need a term for it, like they need like some kind of like name for the power up. And this time it's just he got very blue, and that made him let him bite Gorimon's gun better. Yeah,
It was the literal power of friendship.
the power was the friendship he met along the way. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so Yamato and Garurumon, they defeat Gorimon and the Solarmon. Garurumon throws them off the tower and blasts them off again. And then on the beach, Palmon and Gomon of Digivolve take down the Tankmon. Bergermon fights Dr. Animon until Greymon comes back and defeats him for Bergermon, because thank you, Taichi, for doing everything for Sora. And then once everything's calmed down, they explore the fortress. They see that no one's left. Mimi cleans some dirt off of Gabumon's cheek, which is cute. And we get the first canon dialogue between Mimi and Yamato in the entire series.
Wow.
Entire franchise, I mean.
That's so very sad.
Yeah. So Mimi thanks Yamato for saving them, and then he says that he was the one that was saved by them instead.
Okay, but because for me, and I'm sure that my memories are blowing it out of proportion, but for me, the original series is so defined by Matt just being a jerk until all of a sudden he isn't, and arbitrarily going off on his own and maybe being corrupted and being more Sasuke than thou, that I was just so happy that he had 2 seconds of kind of saying something jerky, but like a 10-year-old would say when he's trying to look cool. And then by the end of the episode, he's realized, that was a jerk thing, and I'm sorry. And like, I don't think this is automatically going to make him, I don't think we've quote unquote fixed his character, but I really liked that he actually apologized. And it wasn't just sort of taken as read that, oh, he was a jerk, but he means well, and he doesn't have to own up to that, because that way lies toxic masculinity, my friends.
Yeah, it's surprisingly mature for him to actually own up to his mistakes. And I don't remember him ever doing that in the original show. Like I feel like it was just, well, he has to defend TK, so like everything he does is excusable, is what I remember.
Yeah, it felt like a more nuanced and modern take on his character that is in line with some of the very subtly updated writing that I've liked with other characters, and it made me happy.
Yeah, I totally agree. It gives me hope that in those subtle ways that this reboot is showing a lot of potential, and not just in like flashy animation ways.
Yeah, it's like my biggest concern with this was that it would be, well, actively bad, but also pointless, because I truly do think the original series, when one can actually access it in an unedited form, holds up perfectly well. I think that the technology has like a retrofuturism appeal these days, but I feel like this is worth watching so far, and that's good.
Yeah. So the episode basically just ends with them finding a computer room, and Taichi's Digivice glows, and he's like, I guess he starts to read the message, and he's just like, it's about the Holy Digimon, and we have to wait to find out. Mm-hmm. I'm a little worried that like this, I don't think this information they're gonna get from it is gonna be that interesting. It's probably just gonna be like, here is where they are, here's this location. Like,
go to the island from Butterfly. You remember Butterfly, one of the top 10 most perfect openings of the 1990s? Go there.
All right, so let's get into some questions from listeners, questions from Twitter. So first one comes in from Ted Lazy Artist, and they asked, how is it that Koshiro is the only one being transported to the digital world at dial-up speeds? Do y'all think he deserves a big story/character payoff when he finally catches up to the rest of the group?
I mean, like I said, I would love to see Koshiro and Joe interact and work out the weird tension there, but also it kind of made sense to me because they've established that time flows differently the deeper into the internet that you are. So like, it is contrived so that he's in a different place, and that allows them to hold off on certain things plot-wise, but they have put in enough of an explainer that I'm not overly annoyed.
Yeah, like on some level, I'm like, oh wait, he's just been flying he's been doing the same thing for 4 episodes, but it's like, okay, that's because to him, it's only been probably like a couple minutes or a couple hours or something. So it's like, it's explainable. And I think that it's like, I don't know, it's good because he hasn't been completely cut out of the story. He's still able to communicate with them, and it still gives this like tension to like we want to find out what happens once the group's all together. And so it's like I think it's helped in the same way that I've appreciated how the reboot has kind of stretched out, like instead of giving us the characters all right away by like like waiting until episode 6 to get Mimi, waiting until episode 7 to get Joe. Like it made those reveals, not reveals, those once they actually showed up, it made them more impactful. I think kind of similar with this, that like, we're going to be so excited to have the 6 of them together next episode. And even that, it's still not the 7 that we're used to or the 8 that we're used to. So there's still things to look forward to.
I will be, I guess I will be a little disappointed if he just joins up and nothing changes. But
yeah, if it's just like, oh yeah, this is just like when I was talking to you on the phone. Like, yeah. So the next question came in from Jahi Johnson, and they asked, do you think Yamato was being praised a little too much despite calling everyone deadweight? We know why he did that, but the kids just go, he's so cool right away. I'm just maybe being too cautious to Taichi and Yamato's special treatment. So I think this question is mainly talking about before he's apologized or anything, but in the moment, like after he's run off on his own, when they are, there's a moment where like Taichi and Sora are like, oh my god, he's so cool.
right.
And I don't know, I guess I see their point.
Yeah, I think I had that same worry before he apologized. Like, oh god, here we go again. Yamato's going to be a jerk, and people will just automatically assume best intentions, and he'll never have to work for it. So I totally get still having that concern. I personally feel better about it after the end of the episode.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's if they hadn't had that conclusion, then it would be worrying. But with that, I think it's wrapped up in a nice way, and it's like maybe like in the internal logic, not the soundest, but like that's not what matters. Next question from Empire Will, and they asked, when will the concept of levels, i.e., champion, be introduced and how? So this is something that causes me stress because so our podcast has always before Tri came out, before modern Digimon stuff came out, we were always covering the dub because that was the main thing that was available legally. So I'm very well steeped in dub terminology, and then once we started covering Tri and now this, it's like okay, now we have to handle like dub and sub terminology. So like the distinction between champion in the dub versus adult in the sub, and ultimate versus perfect and mega versus ultimate, it stresses me out. And so I like try to just say both now. And I think Tri even like I think they did eventually start mentioning like once they got so in Tri, spoiler alert, they get to mega / ultimate, they get to their final evolution form, and I think at that point they mentioned the term. But yeah, 8 episodes into this show, they have not mentioned the terms for like rookie or champion or child or adult. So
I kind of like it that way as somebody who's not super into the franchise. So maybe that gives me a different opinion. But I feel like it would feel less naturalistic if it was very term heavy for these children in this isekai setting.
Yeah, I think the term heaviness makes sense when you're like, oh, it's a video game. Like, what's the name for level 1? Oh, now we get to level 2. That's cool. But yeah, it does feel like more naturalistic while they're still discovering the world to not really use the terminology or throw it around yet. But it seems like the next episode is titled The Ultimate Digimon Attacks, which is using, it seems like this official sub terminology is going to be using the quote unquote dub terminology of ultimate for the next stage instead of perfect.
Oh, I'm in Yu-Gi-Oh! Hell all over again.
Yeah, you're in the Shadow Realm. Like,
no. Oh.
But yeah, so it seems like at least the title card's mentioning form levels, so like I'm guessing they're going to start talking about them. Like I mean, especially once Koshiro arrives, like he could very well just be like, oh, because he was even in episode 2 looking up Digimon information on his laptop, right?
Yeah, he was. I don't know how he got that research, but he made it happen.
Did I imagine that?
Yeah, I feel like he was starting to put together like rudimentary graphics of Digimon information somehow.
Yeah, so I would not be surprised if some Koshiro plot device allows them to start referring to them by terminology, by level terminology. Second to last question comes in from, I don't know how this is pronounced, but I'm gonna guess Nat, and they ask, I want to hear your thoughts on group dynamics. This week hinted at more possible interactions that were rare in the original, Mimi Yamato, for example. An issue for me with the original was the presence of narrative cliques, TK, Hikari, Tai Yamato, etc. What do you think about that, Vrai?
It's definitely what I'm most excited about. Like, if you're going to lean into the canonical fanfic remake stuff, that's the best way to do it, is explore these sort of character dynamics that you didn't touch on before. Like, I'm jazzed about that, frankly, because you have 8 characters. There is so much potential there.
Yeah, I think the original show was surprisingly, I'm surprised looking back on it how much it, like, in that early arc on Fire Island, they were like putting Joe and Sora together. And I guess that's the weirdest one of the group, because like for some reason Koshiro and Mimi makes sense. But
That's a time worn sort of, because she's, she's very outgoing and he's very shy, and
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I guess the original show did some of that, of some like pairing them off and seeing interactions between characters we wouldn't normally expect. But I'm hopeful to see more of that in this reboot, because it seems like that's really, if there will be one vibe I would get from the show so far, is that it seems to be more about interactions between characters.
yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, to me, the original Digimon is basically the perfect kids adventure anime, because you're on an adventure and you have a cool dog that's your best friend and talks to you, and you go and you do cool things on your summer vacation, and then you go home, and I don't know, like its formula as an adventure show is so far not shaken from one that was pretty workable before, honestly, as a show for kids. So I feel like the place where it can really grow in interesting ways is exploring those character dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the original format of the show, it was like you're saying, that it's a perfect adventure atmosphere. Like it's supposed to start off as this like, oh my god, we're stranded here and we hate it here, and this is like so miserable. This world is so terrible. We just want to go home. And then fast forward to the end of the show, and they're like, oh my god, we just want to stay here forever. No, you need to go home because the eclipse is going to end. You need to go home now. And like, oh no, we love it here so much. And I feel like I don't know if this scenario, this reboot seems so different, because they have a mission in mind, like they need to save Tokyo in 3 days. Like I wonder if by the end of it they're still going to have that like, oh man, we love this world so much, we wish we could stay.
Yeah, it's like the creep in of season 2 logic, which had that
Yeah,
sort of back and forth element.
right. Yeah, I guess we'll see if this ends up being more 0-2 or not.
Mm.
So the last question came in from Sniper in My Heart, and they asked, who is your favorite Digidestined? So I think we kind of covered that a little bit, but I'm curious how you feel for this reboot so far.
I mean, I do overall my favorite character is Ken. It's super Ken, not least because as a kid, he's like the character the fictional character I most strongly associate it with. That very trans moment of, oh man, wait, I don't have a crush on this character. I want to be this character. So I have like very warm feelings about him. I have a figure of him over on my shelf and everything. But for this reboot, I don't know. I really like just about everybody. Like after this last episode, it might be a tie between Mimi and Joe, but that might just be because we've seen them shine most recently. It's like Sora's episode was also very good, and Koshiro also very good. They're just good kids.
Yeah, I agree. They're all good kids, and it's hard to decide. I would have, before this episode, I would have said Koshiro, but also like he's been so sidelined that it's hard to say how he'll actually be once they're all together.
Mm-hmm.
And Yamato's putting him in contention because like he did show so much progress in this episode, and I mean, my like 9-year-old self, like it calls back to me, but like he's so cool.
Uh-huh. Every dumb 9-year-old is like, oh man, Matt is the coolest because we're fools.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I had the speaking of Ken, I had I guess my bisexual experience was the opposite, where I was like, I want to be Ken. Oh no, I have a crush on Ken.
Oh no, I want to tenderly hold Ken's hand.
Ugh.
Yeah, Ken was the center of a lot of feelings for a lot of queer kids, I feel like.
Yeah. All right. So now moving on to our 3-word reviews. So we ask for these on Twitter after the episode airs. Ancient Irismon said, Mimi braided fur.
DJ Discobot says, Joe, you goofball, with a pensive face and a relieved face, which, yes.
Talizi Artist said, Saving Private Digimon.
Empire will, friendship time stop.
The Older Malgren said, is Digislaughter conventional?
Andy Lucas TT, best episode yet.
At Actual Triangle, everything I needed.
At Yawning, Tyora equal Yamato stands.
I asked them for clarification on that because I don't understand, and they were not clear. They were like, I only have 3 words. Interpret it how you will.
Fair enough. They followed the format.
So, like, I guess they're saying that Yamato stands Tai and Sora?
Maybe?
Eric T. Lugo said, Taichi Yamato confirmed.
At Anurin_Nat, Yamato Mimi confirmed. And then the side eye.
At One Lady of Blades 1 said, Joe's the best.
And at Lost Thief, brilliant job, Joe. So much shipping talk.
Yeah. This is a fun episode.
Yeah, it really is fun. Like, this gives me hope for, because I guess a part of me was a little concerned for how big episodes that are about the whole group would do. And I think this one is good sign. Like, even though it was mostly about Yamato, it had a lot of little moments for everybody else to get to do something cool, except for Sora. Poor Sora.
Yeah, that's kind of how it all goes. Everyone got great moments, except for Sora. I mean,
Yeah,
Sora did still have that one moment where she ran out to go be a decoy willingly along with Taichi. Like
that's true.
that was a cool moment. And
Just please don't reduce Sora to being the mom character again, show. I can't.
yeah, yeah. Even just hearing people, even just hearing fans talk about Sora, like people so easily gravitate towards that. They're like, "Oh yeah, Sora's being the mom," and I'm like, "Is she though, or do you just
I
jump to
mean,
that?"
she
Because
has very sweet protective instincts, which I think is a great part of her character. It just bums me out when that's all people can think to do with her on the writing
yeah,
end, you know?
yeah. But yeah, I was really worried about like one of the big questions that had been unaddressed for what the series would be like is how is it going to handle the group cast altogether? And if this is an indication of what it's like on a regular basis, that's great. I guess I'm still a little worried that like, okay, maybe they put all of their eggs into this one basket and they like put a lot of effort into making this debut of the it's not even the full cast, the 5 out of 6, 5 out of 8 of
Mm.
them.
Yeah. Mm.
Like it could be that I don't know that like on the regular once they're in a group that it's not as good as this premiere that they thought about a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, that could be what part of why they have Koshiro out doing his thing is that it's it's trying to early on keep the size more manageable for group scenes, which hopefully means they will find non-contrived ways to keep the group in smaller units going forward.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't have. I feel like towards the end of the show, the original season, like the background cast faded to the background. Or actually, the example, I don't think you didn't mention Digimon Frontier, so I assume you haven't watched that season.
I have not. I have a friend who's super into it, but I never saw it.
There are really cool aspects of it, especially if you're into trains. It's very train heavy, but the perhaps the most frustrating aspect of it about it is that like it has some cool characters, some interesting characters, but basically by like the halfway point, it just becomes all about the main two, all about the Taichi and Yamato equivalent. And it's just
Yeah.
like the other ones are just there in the background cheering them on. And it's like, oh,
Yeah, that sucks when that happens. And I will be very sad if this. And honestly, I'm a little concerned just from the first 3 episodes that it could go that way, but I'm hoping. I'm really hoping.
yeah. So like maybe what they're doing by avoiding having the whole cast there, they can keep it more manageable and avoid that happening. That would be nice. Because this episode, even though like I think if you were to look at screen time, Taichi and Yamato got the focus. Yeah, we still enjoyed everyone.
Hmm.
Do you have any other thoughts about this episode you didn't get to mention?
I don't think so. I'm just surprised how much because sometimes I'll go actually I had to catch up on a couple episodes for the podcast because I was 1 or 2 behind, but it's a very pleasantly bingeable show.
Hmm,
I'm just so happy by about how much I'm enjoying this and how much it has exceeded my expectations. And yeah, I'm gonna look forward to where it's going from here.
cool, cool. How would you rate this episode out of 5 stars?
I would rate it 4 out of 5, just because to me 5 out of 5 is a really incredibly stellar Wibbly episode, and this wasn't quite as good as the Joe episode before that.
Yeah, I think I also want to give it 4 out of 5 stars. Because I think it was very, very solid and, like definitely above average, but wasn't like, oh man, this is like I gave a higher rating to the episode that had the info dump, episode 5,
Mm,
because that made me like excited for the future of the series. And this one doesn't make me quite as excited about that, but it was a
yeah,
very solid episode.
yeah, it's super solid. It just it didn't like overwhelm with the feelings or introduce some very cool new bit of info.
Yeah. So I've wanted to have a segment where we talk about our MVP for the episode, but I was like, this seems silly while it's still the intro arcs. But so I wrote it down for this episode, but then after the episode aired, I'm like, I guess it was just Yamato intro episode. So
It was, but also I would like to give a special shout out to Mimi for being very good.
she is very good. I almost want to give it to Palmon for like, putting up with Joe, constantly reining him in, literally. Palmon's some good comic relief, especially when she is the one that points out that it wasn't Mimi's towel. But I guess I have to give it to Matt because I'm basic.
He did good. He's a good boy.
Yeah. So the next episode, teaser, episode 9, is titled The Ultimate Digimon Attacks. It seems like it's going to be a one-on-one battle between Ogremon and Greymon, a revenge match, but they possibly get interrupted by Metal Tyrannomon. The wording of this in the preview was vague on purpose because I'm thinking maybe that's Ogremon digivolving into Metal Tyrannomon. But then the only other detail I noticed in the preview was that it looks like Koshiro is there physically. Do you have any thoughts?
I kind of hope they get interrupted because, as neat as they are in short spurts, I'm not super into the episodes that are mostly battles. I like the exploration elements more, so we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. Like the premise of an episode based on one battle seems cool, but like I don't want it to just be a fight for the entire episode. And yeah, I'm a little worried about introducing the concept of ultimate/perfect form so soon, but who knows what this means. It could mean that there is this big threat out there they have to avoid for a while until they can find a way to counter it, or it could mean that we see Metal Greymon. I don't know.
Yeah, I have really liked how good the show has been about establishing a threat level that feels like constantly as though the kids are sort of cornered, but without
Mm.
like it feels like a credible threat that is a continuous presence, but it's not like too scary for kids. It's very effective tension building.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens next episode. So now we're gonna get into some other stuff we've been enjoying that isn't Digimon. So Ryan, do you have anything you want to recommend?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I thought about recommending Hannibal, but then I realized that that would be maybe not good for for your audience, for the type of person who is coming to a dedicated Digimon podcast. Although if it is, I could use a season 4. But if you want something that's kind of the same fun adventure mood, I would recommend Suritama, which is an an anime from 2011. It's 12 episodes long, and it is about a little fishing village where a boy named Yuki has moved to live with his grandmother, and he suffers from terrible social anxiety. And one day he meets a space alien named Haru, who informs him that he has to help him fish up this gigantic fish, otherwise the world will end. Except that Yuki has never been fishing before. So it's part hobby anime and part like 50s sci-fi throwback. It has this beautiful pastel color palette and these cool like flat looking colors that are very reminiscent of Yuasa, if you're a fan who did like Devilman Crybaby and Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. It is just a relentlessly fun and sweet and very gentle show. It's not overtly queer, but it is pretty heavily queer coded. Yuki and
Oh
Haru
yeah.
are basically the two leads from Ponyo, but middle schoolers. Like, they're super sweet. And I think the only thing to warn for is that even though this is a very nice show that doesn't really pick on any of its characters, there is certainly something to unpack about the fact that the character who is the secret government agent infiltrating the high school to watch the alien
Mm,
is the only brown character, and also they all wear turbans. Like, there's some accidental racist stuff to unpack there, Suritama. But
mhm, mhm.
but overall, it is just a very sweet, relaxing show that will make you interested in fishing, a thing I didn't think was possible.
Yeah, I kind of totally forgot. I watched that show when Digimon Tri was first announced, and we saw the character designs, and I was like, oh, what other things has this character designer done? And I was like mainly watching it to like see how it informed before
Oh,
Tri came out. Oh, did you not know that connection?
I did not, but like now just thinking about it for 5 seconds, that makes sense.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a very cute digestible show. Like it was a fun experience, and I feel bad because I haven't thought about it much since, but it was a fun time.
Yeah, I feel like it's a show that doesn't make a lot of people's top tens, but it is one I often think of fondly, especially because it's maybe one of the best depictions of social anxiety that I've seen, certainly in anime.
Like it uses a lot of water metaphors for that, right?
Yeah, where he feels like the screen fills up and he feels like he's drowning when he has to
Mm.
talk to other people, and like stuff kind of fades out. It's very good.
On the other hand, I'm going to recommend a pair of things, one of which is not good and one of which I think is good. So I'm going to recommend two recent-ish gotcha games that came out, and they have a common theme. So the first is Sino Alice, which is from the mind of Yoko Taro, famous for the Nier franchise. Um, and it recently came out in English and it's been out in Japanese for a while, but it is basically the most like middle school edgelord chuny BS take that you could ever have on fairy tales. Like it's just, it's not like what if Pinocchio were a little evil? It's like what if Pinocchio's nose grew whenever he murdered people, and like what if Sleeping Beauty wanted to murder people so that she could stay asleep because she really loves sleep. And it's just like it takes it to such an extreme that actually I really don't like that kind of like negative and cynical mood, but it takes it to such an extreme that it's hard to take it seriously at all. It's just so absurd. And the pair that I want to recommend with that is Twisted Wonderland, which is not available in English yet. But if you have a way to get Japanese apps on your phone, you can get it from the Japanese App Store or Google Play Store. And it is an official like Disney spinoff about the Disney villain children, or like twisted versions of Disney villains as pretty Bishonen high school boys.
Oh, I've seen ads for this. It looks wild.
They are so sweet and so cute, and like is like contrasted to Sino Alice. So Sino Alice is taking these like protagonists of fairy tales, which by the way, I love that Yoko Taro decided to focus on these fairy tales because they were free and in public domain. So he was like, well, it's cheap, so yeah, we'll do the free characters, sure. Whereas Twisted Wonderland is taking the villains of Disney stories and making them sweet, pretty, innocent boys. And it is very pure. It's basically that magical school series that I will not name, but with Disney villain characters.
Doesn't it have a hot Iago? Was that a thing I saw?
I think so. It's hard for me to like notice what they're actually based on. I think there is a. I don't think he's hot. I think he's a twink.
Somebody's thing.
Well, yeah, he's hot to someone. Oh wait, that's oh. He was my favorite. Is he based on Iago? Oh no.
Oh no.
Wait, is that no? Because that's I don't know what they're based. Because they're kind of like I don't think any like their names are not explicit. It's not like oh this is Jafar. It's
Right.
like the one that I was thinking of is oh god what's his name? The thing is so like I haven't put enough effort to actually try to read the Japanese. I just consume it to look at the boys. The character I like is Kalim Al Asim, and I guess he's maybe based on Iago. I'm not sure.
He might also be hot Jafar.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Those are the two Disney-ish gotcha games that I have been enjoying recently.
My contribution to that is that Sino Alice is not fun to play, but I can have my son 9S in it. So that's, you know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, if you roll, did you roll him?
I beat my head against the gacha long enough to get enough medals to exchange for him.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I am able to do that because that's yeah, he's the only sweet boy I care about in that game.
I mean, there's also Emil, the small baby gay who is sad.
Yeah, I the original Nier just didn't resonate with me. So, but Automata, 9S, he's perfect.
He's a good sweet boy. Do his best.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. Last week I asked people which character in all of Digimon has the best intro episode, and my favorite response came in from @AustinLC23 on Twitter, and they said Rika. From the get-go, we learn about her view on Digimon and can see where her arc will go, yet they don't reveal everything about her immediately, and her development afterward takes time. It highlights her flaws and strength without revealing all the cards from the get-go. And this week's question is what two Digimon characters that have never interacted with each other in canon would make the best pair? And I will read my favorite answer that comes in to that question. You can send your question responses and general feedback to podages@gmail.com, to podages on Twitter, or in the comment section for this episode on podages.com. If you want to support the podcast, it really helps out if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If this is your first episode, please make sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you find podcasts. And share the podcast with your friends who stare so longingly into your eyes that it causes their Digimon to glow. I'm Definitely Jeff on Twitter. You can also check out my general anime podcast where we preview new anime that's coming out in the season. Called Love It or Weeb It. Vrai, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to find you online, where can they find your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter @WriterVry, which is where I post all of the things I freelance and also a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh fan art, Baccarat fan art. You can find the other podcast I co-host @TrashPod, which has a similar format to this. It's my partner and her other partner, and we talk about books, movies that are trashy or forgotten, and also Smallville sometimes.
I don't know most of the things that you cover that on the main podcast, but I've been listening to Smallville episodes and they're great.
Well, thank you. That show isn't good, but Dorothy's having a great time showing it to me, and that's what counts.
Yeah, there's so much about that show I did not remember as how terrible it was, but it's kind of the definition of like fun trash, except not so fun sometimes.
You don't get to Riverdale without Smallville, and that is a fascinating autopsy to make.
So yeah, any recent podcasts or articles you especially want to plug?
A month or two ago, I wrote a really long essay about systemic oppression in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why it's really frustrating that the manga got cut off soon, right as it was starting to get to like moral complexity and stuff. So if you want to hear me scream about a 20-year-old shonen manga, you could look at that. I also wrote something for Fanbyte about Ascendance of a Bookworm and why it really values things that are traditionally coded as women's work, like crafting and their importance to like trade and economies and systemic oppression. So Ascendance of a Bookworm is good. Go watch it. Speaking of good isekai.
Yeah, I've been meaning to get into that show. The only thing that makes me a little bit hesitant about it is that like, isn't it technically a seinen manga originally?
It's a light novel.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure where the manga is published, but it came after the fact. And there's a little bit of weirdness in that the adult protagonist is born into a child's body, and there are sometimes like ship vibes with her little with her little friend that she makes, and it's never clear if she's like reborn as a child who has her adult knowledge or if she still has like adult processing power. But it's like a weirdness that the show and the viewer tunes out over time, and the rest of it is just really smart in how it talks about characters and classism, and you learn a lot of cool stuff about crafts.
I mean, the concept of like characters born into a world without books need to create books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is great.
It's great. It's good. It made me hope for isekai again.
All right, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with another guest next week to talk about episode 9, The Ultimate Digimon Attacks. Bye!
Bye!
And remember, never stop digivolving.
虹を見つけたいなら顔を上げなくちゃって差し出された手が僕らをずっと強くする夢を掴みたいなら震えその一歩前に踏み出してごらんよ今ならきっと空を飛べるから
I almost want to give it to Palmon for, like, you know, putting up with Joe, constantly reining him in, literally, with...
That's true.
veining him in. Oh, oof. Vining him in? Not vein. I messed up that joke. It was already a bad joke to begin with.
It's okay, you can fix it in post. You were always funny in post.